Renegotiate Nigeria. Renegotiate Nigeria. The title of this message is Renegotiate Nigeria. And our Bible verse is taken from Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 3 to 4. Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 3 to 4. The word of God says, "Her princes within her are roaring lions. Her judges are evening wolves. They gnaw not the bone till the morrow. Her prophets are light and treacherous persons. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law." This, in a nutshell, is a description of the situation in Nigeria, particularly as it concerns the leadership of the country. The princes, the judges, the prophets, the priests, they constitute a group in the country that has become liability to the land. And therefore, we want to look in this message at the need to renegotiate Nigeria. Before Nigeria became a country, it was negotiated at the Constitutional Conference in London in the 50s, before independence in 1960. There has to be another negotiation of Nigeria if there is going to be peace and progress in the land. Last week, that is the last week in May, the second to the last week in May, a disquieting news broke out about a 22-year-old female youth copper, 22 years, who was arrested to be tried at a Sharia court in Zamfara State for converting from Islam to Christianity. Not a few people believe the story. Many people actually believe the story, which remains controversial today. When the government denied it, many were persuaded that the Islamists of northern Nigeria were only trying to conceal the matter, especially given that similar and worse events have happened in the past and still do, but are usually kept from the press. On May 7, as an example, May 7, 2025, Brother Peter Emmanuel, a young man at Kwasam DCC in Kaduna State, preparing for his first degree from Ekwa Theological College in Gure, Kaduna State, was gruesomely murdered at his residence along with a colleague. They were murdered by the same brutally intolerant religious fanatics, merely because Brother Peter housed a convert from Islam to Christianity who had fled for his dear life from the religious hounds. His hospitality was his crime. His guest had been branded a religious criminal. The furor over the present case is understandable in view of the rampant instances of such happenings in northern Nigeria. It is because of instances of what happened to Brother Peter that the story of that young girl in Zamfara, which the Zamfara state government has denied, that's why people believe it, that it is true. Unfortunately, those cruelties are hardly reported, and many of them are swept under the carpet because of the risk of talking about it publicly, particularly in the north. Considering the countless people killed for no other reason than for being Christians, murder appears to have been legalized in northern Nigeria, so long as the murderer can prove that the victim was a Christian. Besides those countless deaths, there have also been multiple Christian girls abducted in broad daylight and married off to Muslims with the reprehensible backing of their religious and traditional leaders, while the state looks the other way and nobody gives a reasonable ear to the grieving parents of the child. Human and constitutional rights do not appear to exist in a section of the country. The sad case of one country, two legal systems. A few weeks ago, we published a prayer bulletin entitled, "Our Greatest Enemy is Hate." There, with data provided from the presidency, we listed various religious riots that have occurred in northern Nigeria since 1979. With or without provocation, Christians have been murdered, maimed, and displaced in various parts of northern Nigeria and in the Middle Belt. The viciousness of those attacks is nothing short of pure hatred. The situation has degenerated to the point of those Islamist terrorists now ravaging the entire country in different euphemistic names, particularly in northern Nigeria and Middle Belt. They are known as herdsmen, bandits, kidnappers, ISWAP, terrorists, and so on. Now, the attacks have gone from being religious riots and it is becoming ethnic cleansing, deliberately orchestrated, in which Muslims have risen against Muslims. According to Hajia Kaltum Alumbe Jitami, the self-declared emancipator of the Hausas, over 7 million Hausa people were allegedly killed during the 8-year tenure of Buhari. At present, there is open conflict between the Fulanis and the Hausas. The intolerance and discrimination by a section of the country against other citizens is at the root of the dysfunctionality of the Nigerian state. No country can make progress in an atmosphere of suspicion, rivalry, and distrust. Under the circumstances, it is needful to take the country back to the drawing board and renegotiate the federation. The National Christian Elders Forum, NCEF, published a paper some years ago stating that what Nigeria has is, in quote, one country, two nations. The one aggressive and ravaging nation on one side, and all the other ethnic people of the country grouped on the other side. Chief Obafemi Awolowo well said, and I quote, "Nigeria is a mere geographical expression." The fundamental problem is that Nigeria is made up of two races. There is the Negroid, Fulanis, and the other indigenous ethnic nationalities of the Negro race. For many years, the Hausas assumed that they were not Negro, but they were Negroid. That was the assumption, under the illusion of the, in quote, Hausa Fulani tribe. You hear of Hausa Fulani. Recent events have finally convinced the Hausa people that there is no Hausa Fulani tribe in Nigeria. Hausa is Hausa, Fulani is Fulani, Kanuri is Kanuri. The value system, aspirations, and expectations of the Negroid and the Negroes in Nigeria starkly differ. While the Negroes have a democratic approach to life, in which everyone is equal and entitled to equal rights, the Negroid, that is the Fulani is Negroid, it's not Negro. The Negroid see the entire country as a fiefdom, with the Fulani as the feudal lords. This contrasting value system must be resolved if the country should have peace. The situation might have been different, but for the inordinate ambition of the British colonialists, who sought to impose the yoke of neo-colonialism upon the country. At independence, the British deliberately manipulated governance in favor of the Fulani, thereby laying a foundation of imbalance in power. Since independence, Nigeria has not been able to recover from that deliberate sabotage. Therefore, the onus is on the Negro people, the indigenous ethnic nationalities in Nigeria, the Negro race, to set aside all ethnic and religious differences to renegotiate Nigeria. Unless Nigeria is renegotiated and the various groups agree on how the country should be managed, peace and progress will continue to elude the country. According to the ethnic nationalities movement, there are 389 ethnic nationalities in Nigeria, of which 387 are of the Negro race, while Fulani is Negroid and Shua Arab is Negroid. But it is the Fulani Negroid that is at the root of the problem the country is facing right now. So we need to ask the question, how one immigrant ethnic group, that is the Fulani, manages to hinder 387 indigenous ethnic nationalities from renegotiating Nigeria. How could one hinder 387 ethnic nationalities from renegotiating Nigeria? Logically, it is absurd. You will tell yourself it's not possible, but it is. That is what is happening. The answer lies in the divide and rule strategy of the manipulators in the name of religion. And, of course, the greed, capital greed, of the leaders of the Negroes. 3 categories of the leaders of the Negro race have been responsible for the difficulty in renegotiating Nigeria. Those 3 categories of leaders are, number 1, the traditional rulers. Number 2, the religious leaders, particularly the Christian leaders. And number 3, the politicians representing the Negroes. The politicians, the state governors, the senators, the members of the House of Rep. The Negroes have the majority in the National Assembly, but they can't do anything. Why? These leaders, these 3 categories, the traditional rulers, the religious leaders, the politicians of the Negro race, they carry the sad DNA of those African tribal chiefs who sold Africans into slavery in exchange for a bottle of gin, gunpowder, mirror, and cloth. In modern times, the African tribal chief has upgraded their means of settlement to money, houses, land, and exotic vehicles. The concept of collective interest is alien to them. Their compromising and self-seeking attitude is at the root of the strength and dominance of the killers over the much larger indigenous ethnic nationalities who are the actual owners of Nigeria. With a new generation of inquisitive and restless Negro, the Negroid group has adopted violence to beat the others into submission. That's why there is violence in the country. It's deliberate. The new generation of Negroes, armed with education and Western civilization, not willing to submit to servitude on their own land. They have drawn the violence of the Negroid race. Religion has been their clever tool for cultural and political domination, an instrument to divide others. They took it from the British. Most killings of Negro Christians are done by Negro Muslims. It is a Game of Thrones, as during the Civil War. You will remember during the Civil War, it was Christians who were fighting one another during the Civil War. It was Christian Gowon, Christian Benjamin Adekunle, Obasanjo, Danjuma, Dongoyaro, Akinrinade, Alabi Isama, all of them Christians, fought against Christian Ojukwu, Philip Effiong, Okoro, Okonkwo, Nwobodo, all of them Christians. They fought each other in an internecine war that lasted 3 years. After they had decimated themselves, the Negroid schemers took over power, took it back in 1975. 1975. The first thing the Negroids did on getting power was to purge the civil service. That was in 1975. And they dismissed over 10,000 career civil servants to make place for their mostly native authority officials from the north, so that the machinery of governance could be under them. The victims of that purge were the Negroes. Following public outcry against the purge, Murtala Mohammed, the then head of state, appointed Monsignor Pedro Martins, the chaplain of the army, to conduct an inquiry. Pedro Martins reported that 98% of those dismissed in that purge did nothing to warrant dismissal. For producing such a report, Murtala Mohammed dismissed Pedro Martins from the army. What did the Negro race do? Nothing. Therefore, the primary battle of the Negroes for the emancipation of Nigeria should not be against themselves, but their leaders. Is the leaders of the Negro race. Remember them? The traditional rulers, the religious leaders, the politicians. Unless the indigenous ethnic nationalities can call their leaders to order or replace them where necessary, those leaders will destroy them. The real enemy of the Nigerians are those leaders. The crumbs that they get from the Federation account, which ironically belong to them and their people, seem sufficient for those compromising leaders. They do not work for the common good. They only work for themselves. The worst of those compromising leaders are Christian leaders who sit in the office of Jesus Christ and use the name of God to control the minds and hearts of millions of Christian worshippers. Even when God has provided abundantly for them through the offerings and tithes of his people, they are not satisfied. The stolen water and bread that they eat in secret seem more delicious to them than the loaves in the temple. Renegotiating Nigeria requires focus on one task. The starting point and the most important one, a new constitution. All the indigenous ethnic nationalities should give attention to decommissioning the 1999 constitution as amended. If Nigeria is to regain balance, have peace, and make progress, all efforts must be geared towards giving Nigeria a new constitution. The current 1999 constitution is an oppressive tool imposed by military fiat. It lacks constitutional legitimacy. Absurdly, it has been enforced for 25 years. Because of the complicity of the leaders of the indigenous ethnic nationalities, despite their majority in both the Senate and in the House of Representatives. So long as those legislators receive their outrageous and humongous monthly constituency allowance, they will not be bothered about the emancipation of their country. That constituency allowance, it is settlement, regular settlement for the politicians of the Negro race to look the other way while their people are killed and their lands are taken away from them. Nigerians must insist that the next election will not be held under the 1999 Constitution as amended. Nigeria must be renegotiated. The starting point is to demand for a new constitution. And in the demand for the new constitution, the people must insist that the next election will not be done under the 1999 constitution. It must be decommissioned if Nigeria is to regain balance and have peace. It is possible to do it. It is. If there is citizens' demand for a new constitution, it shall be done. And that demand must be made not from the government, but from the leaders of the indigenous ethnic nationalities. If the people can insist to their leaders and demand a new constitution, it shall be done. It is possible. God bless Nigeria.